time here at Nooga Radio, 800-8949, 800-8949. My listener, do feel free to call me. It's a wonderful day, Friday, and I want to make Friday a kind of a slow day, not a huge amount on the agenda, kick back and relax. So if there's something you wish to tell me or ask me, please don't hesitate to do that. Radio is a wonderful medium, and there's a story about Uber suing a mobile ad agency alleging fraud that I think brings a little bit of light to what I do here and how you can prosper with me as a listener, also as an entrepreneur here in the Chattanooga area, and that is by using my platform to further your own ends, thinking only of what I can do for you, thinking in terms of the benefit my other listener is to you and your business. Your goal as a businessman is to get that person to walk into your business, to call your number, or to go to your website. That's my job, is to get those three things to happen. You then make the sale. Radio advertising really does work, and I've got a terrific sales crew. And if you want to talk with me about coming on my station, maybe you want to sponsor my show, or maybe you'd like to be a sponsor of Sean Hannity or Alex Jones, or maybe have your company or have your nonprofit organization appear with the weather or with the traffic, do call me. Just contact me through Nooganomics.com, or just call the station. Uber is suing an ad agency for fraud, a breach of contract, and negligence, and other accusation. Uber says it pays for ads. It only pays for ads that lead to app installations, new signups, or first trips. But Fetch, the target, Fetch Media, coordinated multiple ad networks to purchase ad inventory from a variety of publishers on behalf of Uber. And this suit was filed Monday, according to the Wall Street Journal. Uber says that Fetch misrepresented the effectiveness of its mobile media strategy by failing to prevent and remediate fraud among these networks and publishers. It's seeking at least $40 million, saying that Fetch squandered tens of millions of dollars purchasing non-existent, non-viewable, or fraudulent ads, and then concealing those facts from the advertiser. So many of these, of course, there's some click fraud alleged as well. $7 billion wasted possibly in the market, according to an industry trade group. $7 billion lost on online ads that people don't see because of fake web traffic generated by bots, which are, of course, programs that mimic people and trick advertisers into thinking that they're a person. And so that view by a bot is counted as a human view, and therefore the advertiser pays for it. In addition to fraud, the suit says Fetch failed to pass back to Uber volume rebates, commissions, or discounts received from networks and publishers, causing Uber to overpay for mobile ad inventory. The story says while clicks on Uber ads were reported as coming from placements such as Magic Puzzles and Snooker Champion, the clicks actually came from conservative news sites, news site Breitbart.com. Uber had instructed that no ads be placed on that site. So Uber doesn't like conservative web news platform. Before Uber suspended its ad effort with Fetch in March, it was spending millions of dollars a week on mobile ad inventory that, quote, was purportedly attributable to hundreds of thousands, even millions of Uber app installs per week. But when it suspended the ad campaign, guess what? There was no difference, no material drop in total installs. As digital advertising has evolved, the story says, it has become increasingly complicated to prove the effectiveness of such ads, raising questions in the industry such as, what is the real return on digital ad spending? Are ads reaching the right target audience on reputable sites? How do you prove an ad led to a consumer taking action? Well, it's a huge market. The digital market is $68 billion. The radio market is $14 billion. Print is $26. TV is $70, and that's expected to change a little bit in 2020 by one projection from eMarketer.com. Digital will be $105 billion, TV $77, print $25, and radio $14. So radio is a smaller market. But there is no, there is no godlike, data mining knowledge of these advertisements. Even though you think the internet is very precise and very exact, it really isn't. And so your digital marketing efforts, while requisite, have to be supplemented. I would like to suggest to you, my listener, the man who runs a business, it has to be supplemented by what you could call legacy media, and that's me. That would be other platforms where you really have huge reach. Again, the reach with me is it's involuntary, and it's a message that comes into the listener's ears and mind as he's riding his car or traveling or doing something tedious, putting up wallboard in a construction site, or doing some kind of routine nummery at the office. That's when radio comes in, and he's going to hear your ad there. Radio advertising does work. And remember, if you advertise at Nooga Radio, you're on two terrific platforms. One is being upgraded, and 92.7 FM, and then also 95.3 FM HD4. That's digital radio, and that reaches out 60 miles. That's a terrific, smaller market there, but one that reaches very, very far. All these clicks aren't from consumers. They're bots clicking on click farm sites, which send a small fee to every click to the owner of the site, which just so happens to be the owner of the bots clicking the advertisement. So there's a lot of bleeding going on in the digital sector. There are secret numbers. Charles U. Smith says, click fraud is the industry's dirty little secret, and the numbers are kept secret, lest the reality that the emperor has no clothes gets out, despite all the hoopla about mobile adverts, fast-growing market, et cetera. There is precious little real-world evidence about online advertising actually doing the intended job of generating new sales and attracting loyal customers. So that's something just to think about. This is David Tulis. I do thank you for giving me a minute of your time. I was noticing, I'm noticing stories that come across my feed about policing, and I'd say that the Ferguson riots in 2014 and the use of social media, the use that you have, my listener, of your own phone to record interactions are extraordinarily important. Because we have digital technology, because we have the internet, these old systems of control are breaking down. Look at the digital advertising story is a story about the loss of control by newspapers, right, by TV stations. And though there seems to be problems in that market, on the whole, it's generally very good, because with knowledge and with evidence, things change, right? The mass sentiment changes against certain things and for other things. I think when we deal with the policing situation across the country, and even here in Chattanooga, I'd say there's a rule that I would ask. I would ask that person, if he were here, who's wearing the blue uniform, I would ask him this: why are you an officer in the first place? And I would appeal in a discussion about, say, reading Miranda rights to people who are under arrest, something that's not required, even though it's required in the policy. Apparently, it's often not done. Jerry Summers tells me in an email that, well, these are investigatory stops and not accusatory stops. Well, to me, if you're stopped, it's accusatory by definition. It's belligerent from the first moment, right? You can't say, well, it's just investigatory, and somehow defend it. Jerry and I are going to ask. I'm going to ask him about that in the future. He's, of course, a leading local attorney whose case led to the important decision in 2001, City of Chattanooga versus Davis, and other cases as well. I think it was his case that brought us the Hicks decision on roadblocks. Again, a decision that is accepts an unconstitutional act, has the court accept an unconstitutional act, but with court regulations. So you have decisions, because the Constitution is not in order, that puts the Constitution is not respected, that puts the court in the position of regulator. And that's what we have now. We're living under the Hicks rules for traffic, for roadblocks, right? And that's the Jerry Summers case as well. The hot calling of the officer, I think, is worth calling to mind, especially as we read stories about the Indian elder who was told to stop, and he didn't stop. And so he was beaten up at the hospital. He was going there to visit his mother in her last hour of life, but he was beaten up outside the hospital because he didn't stop when the cop said stop. The cop said stop for no clear reason. So there's an operation in policing that is very worth thinking about, and as a social phenomenon. Policing are a state phenomenon, and they are a social phenomenon. And perhaps the strongest defenders of policing per se are conservatives, right? Conservatives who are, the law and order types. They effectively don't care about liberty and don't care much about constitutional government on that point, right? They want freedom everywhere else, but when it comes to policing and border walls, they are not for freedom in the least. And the calling of officer, I'd say, has a good point. A man becomes an officer because he wants to serve the public. He wants to be involved in safety. He wants to protect people. He wants to catch the bad guy. He has an empathy for the innocent. He wants to protect those who deserve protection and harass those who deserve harassment. That's pursuant to Romans 13, right? The duty of the state, the duty of the king is the ministry of the sword. He wants to be part of that ministry of the sword that biblically belongs to the judge and the jurors in a trial. And so it is a high calling for officer. There is something self-sacrificial about that calling. And that's why, because it's there, I have to think back, well, okay, the individual beating up the woman in the summer dress, for not using an indicator light, or Sandra Bland, beaten to death in a jail after a very abusive arrest. These are evidences of the state acting against the individual and demanding compliance of the individual and expressing what I would call a proprietary interest in the man or woman confronted by the officer, right? There's a proprietary interest in the Indian elder in the story out of Wagner, South Dakota, of Raymond Cournoyer. A proprietary interest in that man. The state effectively owns that man. And that's what police reflect that. Okay, so we have on one side the state's interest through the officer against the individual, of ownership of individuals at any particular moment. A necessity for compliance, instant obedience, or death. That's effectively what it's come down to. But now those things are not why the officer became an officer, right? The man who became an officer or the woman who became an officer did so with a self-sacrificial interest to help people, to protect people, to ensure safety. Even commercial enforcement often has a safety interest, an ostensible safety interest, even though in the Hicks ruling of the early 2000s, the judge, Mickey Barker, was the local judge, was the author of that decision. He said there's no clear evidence that licensure of cars enhances licensing of driver enhances safety, and it has yet to be proven. He says that. Okay, he just says that flat out. So there hasn't been a proper challenge to that issue, not yet, anyway. Now, the thinking that the officer should exhibit is, I would say, in traffic stops, in stops of people on sidewalks, in the officer dealing with a young black man who looks suspicious, right? Young black men tend to look suspicious according to the police way of thinking. There should be evoked in the officer's breast the original call, right? Why did you become an officer in the first place? Well, to keep the peace, to break up fights, to protect innocent. If there's a mass shooter, I'm going to be the one there first, and I'm going to take the shot. I'm going to take the bullet in the ankle, like that officer did with Muhammad Abdulaziz, who took that shot and is now a hero because he's willing to sacrifice himself to put that man out of our misery, right? If there is an accident, and we have many killings by police which seem to be accidental, right? They don't seem to be intentional. They seem to be circumstance-driven. But I would suggest that the calling of self-sacrifice should have in mind an argument that you, my listener, have made, but I want to articulate that for you. And that is this: if there's an accident to be had, if an accident is going to occur, better that it be on the part of and against the officer as against the citizen, right? The citizen who does not deserve capital punishment. If there's an accident on whether the man has a gun or a phone, or whether the man's reaching for a gun or reaching for his wallet, that when there's an accident, that the burden of the mistake not fall upon the citizen who is now slumped dead in his seat or lying bleeding profusely across the yellow marker line. Rather, the officer takes the risk. So if there's an accident and the man is in fact reaching for a gun in the front seat of his car, or is in fact reaching under his jacket for a 9mm, that the accident and there's going to be a death, better the death be on the part of the officer and not on the part of the citizen. And I say that because the officer has already sworn to do that. He has sworn to defend and uphold the Constitution, defend the rights of the people. And if he misjudges an event, if he misjudges what a man is doing and ends up being killed, better that he be killed than that the man whom he misunderstands be killed, right? Better the officer die than the innocent citizen. And I say the citizen is innocent of a capital offense, right? He may have done something unwise dealing with an armed stranger, which the police officer is. A police officer is an armed stranger with a hair trigger mentality, and he's trained over and over again, do whatever it takes. Protect yourself. To bear no risk. Your main duty today on your shift is to come home to your family at the end of the day. That's drilled into the officer day in and day out, according to the Atlantic Monthly. And so if that's the occasion, if that's the way the officer's trained, he's being trained to shift the risk to the citizen and to be unwilling to have that risk borne by himself. And so the question should be this: why did you join the police department in the first place? I think the officer should say, well, to put my life at risk if need be, to die for the innocent, to protect the innocent with my body if need be. Is there an officer who would be willing to lie down over a woman amid a hail of gunfire in a bank robbery? Is he willing to lie down in front of her to protect her from bullets, or is he going to lie down behind her? All right, what's he going to do? Is he going to take cover behind the woman, or is he going to lie down in front of her? Well, of course, he's going to lie down in front of her. He's got a vest on. He may take a bullet in the groin, which is not covered, as the guy in the bank is firing an AK-47 through the door. He's going to cover that woman, right? Well, of course he is. Well, if that's the case, how come when we have these encounters like the Indianapolis the Indianapolis beating of a woman to a rag doll, why in a case like that do we have such abuse? Well, we have such abuse because the officer will bear no risk. He will bear no resistance. His command is a law, right? He thinks that his commands are laws. They're not laws. I mean, lower the window all the way down is not a law. The officer may tell you to do that at a traffic stop, but there's no law that forces you to do that. And you're not breaking a law by saying, well, 2.5 inches is fine. That's where I want to keep it. And no, I'm not lowering the other windows in my car. I'm not doing that. Well, those are commands, but they're not laws. And so when the officer's anger level goes up and his belligerent voice goes into high gear, you might be intimidated, but you're not really breaking a law. So I think, if you're going to stand on your rights and assert, if you're going to invoke, protect, and defend your rights, you need to be aware of that. And so the question is, again, just if I could just restate it, if there's going to be an accident and someone's going to be killed, better that it be not the citizen who doesn't deserve capital punishment, but the officer who is willing, because of his decision to enter that line of work. Better that the injury fall upon the officer who is the willing recipient of the injury, of the accident. You see what I'm saying? I'm not saying that officers should be killed. I'm not saying that private civilians should be killed. I'm just saying that if there's a mistake, if there's a misapprehension of what the man is doing when he's reaching into his pocket, better that it be the officer who has to duck a bullet than that the man is shot dead who's simply reaching for his phone or simply reaching for his billfold or his permit, right? Or getting something out of the glove compartment where the registration would be kept, right? He's not reaching for an Ingram 9mm. He's reaching for his papers, right? The envelope with his papers. And this is not a threat to your personal safety. You see what I'm saying? There needs to be, again, a sense of self-sacrifice. That's why the officer entered that calling in the first place. The training, of course, drilled that out of him, and the training trained him to think in terms of proprietary ownership. Kim Townsend had $80,000 in medical costs after a January 6, 2000 beating by Marion County Sheriff's Office and the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department. She had done something very important. She had failed to use her turn indicator in her car. All I know is that I was on the ground, said Townsend, after she was tackled for failing to stop for police trying to pull her over for failing to use her turn signal. I felt a punch in the back of my head. I felt a kick to my face, and someone stepped on my hands and feet. Fox 59 was given video of the arrest by Townsend's attorney, Greg Tulis, who says that the force by police was unnecessary, unreasonable, and unprovoked. This is a matter where you have trained law enforcement that acted, he says, in a totally outrageous manner. Police officers grab her in a very forceful manner and throw her to the pavement like she is a rag doll. As a result, Kim was seriously injured. The video shows police officers tackling this woman, sending her smashing into a door before she is violently thrown to the ground. As the officer is throwing her down, he positions his knee in her gut sending all 200 pounds of his body weight into a single painful blow. She's not resisting. She appears to be unconscious during some of this kicking and kneeing and punching. And the officers have piled on top of her to make sure, according to Matt Agris, they let her know that trying to avoid extortion for a turn signal violation would be met with extreme force. She had torn ligaments, knocked out teeth, and a fractured bone in her face. And then there's the story about the Indian elder who was denied being at his mother's bedside at her death because he was rushing to the hospital to get there, and the officer said stop, and he kept going. So what do you do? This is David Tulis.
Traffic, news, and